Hello, everyone. Dr. Anna Cabeca here today. And on Couch Talk, we're going to talk about healing your hunger. So if you've dealt with cravings, nasty hunger issues and have had difficulties with emotional eating. I know I have. Well, I bring to you today one of our food addiction experts and a dear friend of mine, and her name is Tricia Nelson. So Tricia, it's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much. So good to be here. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. And I want to tell our audience a little bit about you and then I'll have you elaborate some more and share your story with us. But Tricia has been in this emotional eating space for well over a decade and has been living and walking the talk for, ever since I've met you and then well before, and has been so passionate about getting this information out to a wide audience. You have been on NBC, CBS, Fox, Discovery Health, and just have been a highly regarded speaker and coach. And really with what Tricia's specialty has also been in the researching the hidden causes of addictive personality to get to the underlying causes of emotional eating, as well as her own story. So Tricia, will you share a little bit of your story with us?
I would be so happy to. Yes, I have been an emotional eater, I think, since the get-go, as far back as I can remember. And that's probably age 4 or so. But I always remember, Anna, being so happy about food. So just a big highlight for me. And, if my family was going out to dinner, I'd get really excited and almost have heart palpitations, and thinking about what I was going to eat. And, I was a big snacker. And eventually my sister was an overeater too. And she literally taught me how to binge. And we went down to the local ice cream store and each got ourselves a pint of ice cream and a spoon. And we sat there and ate the whole thing, and each of us. And it's like, I just loved food, and I got progressively, my eating got progressively worse as I got older. When I hit adolescence, it was game on, and my body was changing. I was always overweight, but when I was an adolescent, my face looked like a pumpkin. It was completely round, and I was very overweight. And I just hated being overweight. I had a roll in my tummy. I would scrunch up in my hands and I'd want to cut it off. And I thought about, like, oh gosh, if I could get a disease and automatically lose weight, where I wouldn't have to try, or join the army and they'd force me to exercise at boot camp. And, these pretty outlandish, crazy thoughts around my weight, because, stopping or curbing my eating was not really an option. And frankly, it didn't even occur to me. I was just upset about how, much I hated my body, and my legs chafed, when I was in a bathing suit and, at the beach or whatever. So it was just so uncomfortable for me. And it was just an obsession of mine to overcome it. And so I looked in all these different places, and I read self-help books and tried diets and pills and potions and lotions and 12-step programs and therapy. I mean, I really was at it. I was going hard and looking for a solution, and nothing I did worked for me until I found somebody who really it showed me that my problem had nothing to do with food, that food was a symptom of something much deeper. And this person, it's Roy, who's now my husband. And this is literally 30 years ago. And he's a spiritual healer, and he helps people with all different kinds of addictions. And he had been obese himself. And, he shared with me that, it's an emotional issue. It's deeper, and it's spiritual as well. And so that's really where I had to go. And on account of doing that work, I was healed and not cured. I still consider myself an emotional eater, because I can go that direction any day of the week. But by the grace of God, I don't, because of these new tools that I've learned and how to really address the underlying causes. And that's really how Heal Your Hunger was born, and what I love doing for other people.
That's fabulous. And I want to talk about, you've hit so many points that resonate, from binge eating to feeling our own roles, right? And what that feels like, and how we can not enjoy those aspects of our body. So shifting the mindset here is really important. And then you talked about, just that continuing to recognize that emotional eating is is an issue, right? That key part, right? Like with alcohol, the 12 step, 1 is good, 2 is better, right? And how we have to kind of, how do we shift that mentality, and how do we hold that firm line so that we don't cross that and we recognize what we're doing? So I definitely want to hear from you those tools as you address the underlying causes, right? The root causes that have to be addressed to fix this emotional eating. So let's first start with, how does one know if they're an emotional eater or food addict?
Great question. It's, in my experience, it's really a spectrum. And I think everybody to some degree is an emotional eater, and I mean, I think God made us that way, right? Like we like to eat, it feels good, it comforts us. I mean, so we'll keep doing it, but obviously people take it to different levels and extremes. And on one end of the spectrum is just basic emotional eating. On the other end of the spectrum is really food addiction. And I've created a quiz called the Emotional Eating Quiz that somebody can take that literally will share with them where they are on that spectrum. They'll get a personalized score, and then what actions they need to take based on their score. But I think that it really is levels of effect is really what we're talking about, because with any addiction, it's not really a problem till it's a problem, and some people just like to eat, and they're foodies, and that's it. And they don't even mind being overweight. So, for them, I say, keep going, like enjoy. But for other people who are really unhappy with their weight, and can't lose weight because this emotional eating issue comes up, then obviously, then there's something to pay attention to. And for me personally, I consider myself an all-out food addict as well as an emotional eater, because my addiction to food got so bad that my binges were like 3,000 or 4,000 calories in a sitting. Like I literally would go to the store, buy, all the sweet things and all the salty things, and something to wash it down with. And it's, it was a bad scene, and so there are people, obviously many, many people out there who do take it too far. And it is in that phase where, once they start, they can't stop. And that's really when it's an addiction, is when they cannot pull themselves back in any way, shape, or form. And that was certainly the case for me. And so, but again, it's a spectrum. Some people can pull themselves back, but that doesn't mean, they're happy about their relationship with food. I mean, anytime somebody is just obsessed with food and they're thinking about it 24/7, whether they're going all the way binging or not, that's a problem. And that's emotional eating. And that's when, it's time to take a look at that and really address it head on.
Yeah, I agree. So, first of all, identifying that there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And the quiz is always a good way to see
Yeah.
and I will provide that link too in our footnotes here. But so why do you think it is that 98% of all diets fail?
It's incredible, isn't it? That, I mean, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if you take 90% of those multi-billions and throw, basically flush them down the toilet, that's what we're doing annually, with all the money that's spent on diets. And I really think that the reason why people aren't succeeding at their dieting, endeavors is because of emotional eating. And nobody's really talking about that. They're thinking it's their metabolism or, whatever their amounts or the amounts of exercise that they're doing or the kinds of exercise. They're choosing these different things and focusing on them. And yet the emotional eating is why we're fat in the first place. I mean, I was overeating. My relationship with food went way beyond nutrition, right? I mean, I was comforting myself with food. I was turning to food when I was stressed. I was eating when I was lonely. I mean, there's so many different emotions that drive us to eat. And if those aren't addressed, no diet is going to work. I mean, we can do a diet for short periods of time. We can, we get all psyched up, right? We're like, here it is. I'm going to do this. This is my food plan. This is the answer. I mean, people who buy one diet book buy jillions of diet books because they're always looking for that quick fix, not realizing that, they can't sustain that way of eating if they don't deal with the deeper reasons why they overeat in the first place. And that's what trips people up. That's why they sabotage.
So how do you get to those deeper reasons? What are some of the deeper reasons why we self-sabotage, for example?
Well, I think it's really important if somebody identifies that they definitely have some kind of emotional, triggers around food or are an emotional eater. I think it's really important to realize that emotional eating isn't just about eating too much or the wrong foods. Emotional eating has so much more to do with the way we literally respond to life. And in my book and in my program, I talk about the anatomy of the emotional eater. And this is basically, I lay out 24 traits, their personality traits, which aren't unique to the emotional eater, but this composite of traits really is, because emotional eaters really take the cake, so to speak, on these traits. And I'd say these are traits that cause us to create the stress that we then stress eat over. Okay. And so it's not that we just happen to have cravings. So much of the time, I know there's physical aspects of cravings, and that's, you address so much of that in your awesome work. But there's also that emotional aspect. And that comes from our personalities. And over the past 30 years that I've done this work, I have seen the same personality traits over and over again, really tripping people up. And I'll tell you, the number one trait of an emotional eater regarding the anatomy of the emotional eater is people pleasing. Okay, this is a terrible downfall for emotional eaters. And, I think the reason why we are like such amazing people pleasers is because so much of the time, emotional eaters typically have something in their past that was traumatic, usually in their childhood, that sets them up to start needing validation from outside of themselves instead of inside. And people pleasing is an outgrowth of that, where we're looking for kudos, we're looking for credit. We want people to notice us and give us that sense of self we're seeking. And so it gets us into trouble. And people pleasing at first seems like a pretty harmless, trait, but as you know, and it can really lead to so much trouble, because when we're out there in the world taking on too much, we're saying yes to requests of us, either at work or at home or all the above, civic duties, whatever, and we're overdoing, which overeaters are great overdoers. So we're filling our plate with way too many things, and then we're exhausted, we're stressed out. We've usually skipped meals because we're trying to get it all done. We come home at the end of the day and it's the perfect storm for a binge. It's like, I call it the I deserve it binge. Nobody's ever as pleased as we want them to be when we're people pleasing, right? Like, we don't get the credit we're really hoping or imagining we're going to get. A thank you here and there, but it never fills us the way we expect it to. And so we end up compensating with food. So that's just one example. I mean, there's so many other traits. Like, we're deep feelers. Emotional eaters are deep feelers. People tend to tell us we wear our heart on their sleeves, or we're too sensitive. And, most of these traits, there's an upside and a downside. So being sensitive is a beautiful thing. We are sensitive. We do care about people, but, it also makes us feel like a walking pincushion. We're bombarded by life and events, and all of it just makes us feel overwhelmed with emotion, and then we have to numb that with food. And so these are some of the things that really are germane to the emotional eater's experience that have to be addressed if we're going to get anywhere with our food. And you can see that these things have nothing to do with food, and yet they have everything to do with our relationship with food.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's just that character, right? It's that character of, what's satisfying me, just being able to enjoy yourself and to feel like I deserve it. And yet being that I get that people pleaser. Okay. We don't want anyone to feel any discontent with us. So especially if we're did bake something or prepared something, of course, have to try it, even if we know that may not be the right thing for us. So I think there's many pieces there. So what are some of the tools that you arm women and men with, our emotional eating selves with, to help accomplish this in your work?
Well, regarding what I just talked about, the stress that we create in our lives by overdoing definitely has to be addressed. Somebody can't lose weight if they don't make real changes in their lifestyle. And of course, nobody wants to hear that, but it's just true. We can't remain, our schedules can't be to the hilt every single day without, falling down with food. We have to have a lot more emotional balance. And so, simple, stress relieving things like meditation, I mean, I always recommend that people, I call it the 6 self-care success secrets. And I recommend that people do these things first thing in the morning, because so much of the time we just bolt out of bed, we haven't made any connection with ourselves, with our inner selves, our spirit. And so we're just running on fumes throughout the day. And of course we use food for that quick hit to get us through, where we can get that hit first thing in the morning, with a meditation, prayer, reading routine. It's some kind of spiritual ritual that will help us connect with ourselves. And this makes such a big difference. And I could not be in a thin body if I didn't have this ritual. And it's a non-negotiable for me. Like, I can't go without meditating, because I know how directly it's related to my relationship with food. I mean, everybody I think knows they need to meditate. It's like, oh yeah, meditation, I should really get around to doing that. But it's hard, it's hard to do. And when you're in a community of people who are actually doing these things, obviously it helps. And my course helps people do that. It's all emotional eaters supporting each other in these self-care success secrets. But the idea around it is to really get centered, get still, get quiet, so you have a resource to draw on throughout the day that isn't food. And so that's a huge one. And writing is a good thing. Writing is amazing. Having a daily writing, relationship. And when you do the writing, you're getting emotions out. I mean, it's really, when we are taking on so many emotions, we have to get them out in a healthy way, or we will stuff them with food. So these are some of the things, but definitely changing one's schedule, starting to delegate. I mean, there's some very practical things people can do around just the level of stress in their lives that can make a huge difference. And I just, it's one of those non-negotiables that our lifestyle has to change. I mean, if you imagine, it's like an equation, this amount of stress equals this amount of food. And that's really what it comes down to. If I want less food, of course we don't want less food, but if I want to get results, regarding my weight, I am going to have to, change what I'm eating, and I am going to have eat less food. Well, I have to lessen the stress. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think definitely for me, a day starts out well when it starts out with prayer, meditation, in the Word, and just in a motivational piece or inspirational piece, and just being able to tap into what I'd like, the day to unfold as. And that just creates a whole lot of strength. And like you said, filling yourself with that inner peace, filling your own tank and nourishing yourself in these other ways, because it's not just food, as well as I do. I mean, diet is 25% of weight loss. So there's so many other components to it. So we need to really look at these lifestyle factors. So I love that. Now, but so many people get these, when you're working with healing your hunger, it goes beyond the cravings, right? The food addictions, but there's that really key piece that allows for us to be, so to speak, off the wagon again and again and again. So what do you do to address that? Like how, besides we're working on that meditation piece, and that, like you said, I love that 6 self-care success secrets. So when we're faced with those feelings of turmoil that invariably come up, especially when we're at a time of celebration, right? And even if we've been like so-called good, no cravings for so long, there's that celebratory foods that can derail us. How do we cope around that situation?
Well, it's hard. There's no question about it. And the more your environment is filled with food, the harder it is. I mean, I really feel for people who work in a corporate environment, because jobs are always filled with candy and starchy, ooey gooey foods. Like everybody brings in their leftovers from, the weekend party. I mean, they're always bringing stuff to work. Oh, bring it to work, someone will eat it. That's a very difficult environment. And plus people are bored and they're stressed, and, a lot of them hate their jobs. So it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to eat, right? And so it's just really hard in that environment where everybody else is doing it. And that's why I come back to the idea of the community. One of the aspects of overcoming emotional eating. I have seven different steps, simple steps, but one of them is community. And it is virtually impossible to change one's eating habits without a community of support. It's
Yeah, I agree.
impossible. You got to be around people who are doing this, who are on the same goal. Otherwise, you're falling in with the people who don't care or aren't yet, there where they're addressing it. And so you can't do it in a vacuum, and you can't do it alone. And so that's so, so important. You got to have people you can say, hey, be a part of a Facebook community where it's like, hey, I'm up against this. I'm going to this party that I don't want to go to, and I know they're going to be serving such and such my favorite food. It's really important that you have people who can say, you go girl, like come back and tell us how it went. You got some accountability, and that's so, so important, but there are things people can do also to sort of protect against those situations where there is more temptation than normal. And parties is a place where I always try to bring a food that I know I can eat, that's going to be safe for me. And that's really important. Bringing a buddy who is, comfortable and knows what I'm going through is always a good thing. Eating beforehand is something that I've done often, just so I don't have to deal with it, and I can just socialize and not have to be stressed about getting exactly what I need, food wise. But, day-to-day temptations that come up, I always encourage people to look for the source of stress, and it's usually, it's stress. And I just came from a conference that was very fun, but there was stress in that I was learning things that I felt overwhelmed by. And overwhelm is, a trigger for me. When I feel overwhelmed, I'm all of a sudden hungry. It's just amazing how hungry I get, the more information that's being loaded on me. So,
I totally hear you on that one. It's just like, I can just think studying for a test and eating at the same time.
Yeah,
Nonstop.
And so it's just really important to just get conscious and connected to what's really going on. And I had to say to myself, like you're not hungry. You ate just a couple hours ago. You're okay. And so what's really going on? And it's like, oh yeah, I just feel overwhelmed. And it's not, overwhelm is just a big, it's an umbrella, but it's really a word for thoughts and feelings that are uncomfortable. That's really what overwhelming is. And usually when I feel overwhelmed, like by information overload, what's really happening is in my head, I'm having a lot of negative thoughts. Like, I can't do this. How am I going to implement this? Everybody gets this but me, like all those negative talk or all that chatter in my head. I have to really take a look and say, oh, I'm just feeling like I'm not going to get it. Like, I'm just feeling insecure and basically like I'm the only one who's not ever going to get there, and so I have to take a look at that. And then it's got nothing to do with hunger. It's the thoughts and the feelings that are uncomfortable that I want to just put a blanket over so I don't think and feel them. But if I can address it head on and just have that moment, it's just such a habit to eat. When we're uncomfortable, it's such a habit to eat. And we have to have a pause where we stop, we pivot, we take a look at what's really going on, because cravings are, they're so often from that place of stress and some kind of negative emotion.
Yeah, no, I hear you 100%. And then, one of the things is you and Roy do a lot with spiritual healing. How do you incorporate these spiritual aspects into your program, into your life? What do you do?
Well, I start my day on my knees. I literally slide out of bed on my knees, and I end my day on my knees. I don't think God needs me to be on my knees, but it helps me, connect when I am. And so I start my day on my knees. I meditate twice a day, in the morning and before dinner. And I always say it's not, I don't have empirical evidence, but I believe that people will eat at least 200 calories less at dinner if they meditate first. So I do have meditation and a prayer practice. I read, several spiritual readings in the morning as part of my morning routine. But the bottom line, Anna, is that I don't have willpower. Like, I do not have willpower. Like, if it's between me and a cookie, the cookie will win,
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to have a higher power doing for me what I can't do for myself. And that's really why I have these spiritual practices that I do, because I must, I mean, I do have evidence, if I don't do my prayers, I call it my walk pray. It's one of the self-care secrets I talked about. And I praying is one and walking is one. And I put them together, and I do a walk pray every day, and I talk out loud. I put earbuds in my ears from my phone, and I talk out loud to God. And I live in the city, so I'm walking, I'm always passing people, and they don't know who I'm talking to, so I talk out loud and I pray, and I absolutely have to have that prayer, because it's, I don't have the power to not overeat. Like, I don't have the power to say no to a cookie. I don't have it, and I cannot depend on willpower, because my willpower lasts like maybe an hour every day, first thing in the morning, and then poof, it's gone. So it has to come from a spiritual place. And so that's what I teach. That's what my course is so much. It's not about that, but that's one of the very, strong messages of my program. My 10 weeks to freedom from emotional eating is about helping people get still and quiet and start making that spiritual connection, so they have a source of power, that can help them make saner and healthier choices that they normally wouldn't make.
Yeah, no, I 100% believe you. And I think that's it. Like, in myself, I have no willpower. And then I love the way you put that. If it's between me and a cookie, the cookie wins. And just recognizing that is huge, right? And
Yeah.
then, and so preparing yourself to release that and resist that, and know that, okay, God, I can't do it, but you can. And that's a beautiful visual to empower yourselves with. And I think the more you get into that practice and discipline of prayer, meditation, you're increasing, we know it decreases cortisol, increases oxytocin. So there's less volatility. There'll be less craving. So from the hormonal, the physiologic aspect, you're empowering your physiology of willpower, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so that's powerful. Well, Tricia, it's been great to have you here. So we know we're going to give the link to your quiz, and can tell us a little bit about the quiz again, and then also tell us what is one thing that really makes a difference in your life, that empowers you the most. Is one pearl that you do on a daily basis that you highly recommend everyone to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I recommend people take the quiz. That's a great place to start. Know your score, know where you stand. And the one thing, would you say a pearl of wisdom, or a pearl of
your pearl of wisdom.
my pearl of wisdom? Well, I would say just a reminder to people that it's not about the food. And so, when you I know it feels like it when you're wanting that thing, that piece of chocolate or that cookie or whatever, you want to check out with a whole bunch of food. Just know it's not really about the food, and that isn't your deepest desire. Our hunger is really for connection. Our hunger is really for, that sense of oneness and wholeness, not only with others, but with God. And so just check in and tap in and know that it's not about the food.
Yeah, I have to emphasize that point, that hunger is about connection, that hunger for connection. And when we think too, again, just the physiology, right? So oxytocin, the hormone of connection, and, understanding that we get that positive feedback. Actually, when we distend our stomach, oxytocin's released. And so that's certainly one way to get that feeling of connection, but that's not the ideal way to get it. The ideal way is through community. You're not alone. And that higher spiritual connection that you so beautifully discuss and is part of your life, and you live it, you walk it, is a higher, is higher connection, higher oxytocin. And then that just filters out into a joyful, happy life. In my program that we've had recently, my Magic Menopause program, weight loss is a beneficial side effect. And just like in your program, it's a beneficial side effect. What we see is this loving, happier, contented, more connected person. And one of one of my clients put it this way. She said, I'm happier, but more importantly, everyone's happier with me.
Yeah, no kidding. And that cuts down on a lot of stress.
That does. And so it's a win-win. Investing in yourself, investing in filling your tank, um, just has this overflowing abundance in your life for sure. So I would encourage our listeners to please check out Tricia's quiz, the Heal Your Hunger quiz. It's important to just kind of identify where you're at. And that's all part of our discovery process. We continue to discover. It doesn't matter if we're 20 or 80, right? We continue to learn things about ourselves. And also, please comment below in our Couch Talk on our podcast. Also share this. If you're listening here on iTunes, please rate us. And I look forward to hearing your comments and questions and suggestions for further podcasts as well. Tricia, again, it's been beautiful to have you here with us today on Couch Talk.
Thanks, Hannah. Great to be here.